It was past midnight, and the entire school was dead silent, except for one thing: the unmistakable ear click of high-heeled shoes. Koi, koi, koi. It echoed through the long corridors of St. Mary's Girls' Boarding School, each step growing louder, closer. Amaka sat up in her bunk, her heart pounding. The sound had woken her from sleep, like it had done for several nights now. She strained her ears, her mind racing. She wasn't the only one hearing it. Other girls in the dormitory had begun to stir. They all knew the legend. Everyone had heard the stories whispered in the dark. The story of Lady Koi Koi. Amaka's eyes darted to the door. There it was again, louder this time. Koi, koi, koi. The sound of these haunting high heels was just outside the dormitory. The door creaked open slightly, and a shadow spilled across the floor. The girls froze in terror. Was it her? The ghostly figure who roamed the school at night, searching for her lost shoes. The one who punished anyone who got in her way. It all started weeks ago, when strange things began happening around the school. St. Mary's was a large old boarding school, nestled deep in the hills of Enugu. The school had been there for decades, and though the students were used to the old creaking building, something about the past months had felt off. The air had grown colder at night, and the heaviness lingered that the girls couldn't quite explain. That was until she came. "Do you think this real?" Amaka whispered to her best friend, Ifoma, one evening after dinner. They sat together in their dormitory, surrounded by the muffin chatter of other girls. The senior said that Lady Koi Koi used to be a teacher back in the day. Shh. Ifoma hushed, her eyes darting around nervously. "Don't say her name out loud." The story went like this. Lady Koi Koi was once a glamorous teacher at St. Mary's. She was tall, elegant, and always impeccably dressed. Her most prized possession was a pair of shining red, high-heeled shoes, which she wore every day. The sound of her heels clicking against the school floors had become so distinct that people said they could recognize her from a mile away. Koi, koi, koi. But Lady Koi Koi had a darker side. She was known for being strict, sometimes cruel, especially to the students who disobeyed her. Rumors said she would hit the girls for the smallest infractions, often using the heel of her shoes as a weapon. One day, after she struck a student too harshly, a group of parents and staff demanded her resignation. Furious, Lady Koi Koi stormed out of the school, vowing revenge. She promised that her spirit would never leave the halls of St. Mary's. Not long after she left, she died in a tragic accident. Some say she fell down a flight of stairs. Others claim she was hit by a car. But the one detail that remained consistent was that her beloved red heels were on her feet when she died. Now, her spirit roams the school, searching for the shoes she lost after her death. Her high heels clicking in the dead of night. The girls were told that anyone who crossed paths with Lady Koi Koi would be punished. just like the students she once tormented. At first, it was just a story, something the other girls used to scare the juniors. But then, Ada, one of the girls in Form 3, went missing during night prep. The teachers searched everywhere for her, classrooms, dormitories, and even the gardens, before finally finding her in the school chapel early the next morning. She was shaking, her eyes wide with fear, muttering about a woman in a long flowing white gown who had followed her through the corridors. She had red shoes. Ada kept repeating, "I heard her coming. Koi, 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 she was looking for me." No one believed her. They said she must have had a nightmare. But the girls started whispering amongst themselves, "What if it was Lady Koi Koi? What if she is real?" The next strange incident happened a few days later. Chinyere, a senior, was heading to the bathroom late at night when she heard the clicking of heels echoing through the corridor. Thinking it was one of the teachers doing rounds, she ignored it. But as she made her way back to the dorm, the sound grew louder, closer, and more deliberate. Koi, koi, koi. She turned around but saw nothing, just an empty dark corridor. The sound of the heels stopped when she turned back. The door to her dorm had slammed by itself. The next morning, she told her friends about it, and they too began to fear the nights when the sound of high heels filled the hallways. Amaka wasn't one to believe in ghost stories. She had always been the brave one, the one who laughed at the seniors' scary tales and faced challenges head-on. But she couldn't ignore what was happening. She had heard the footsteps with her own ears. She had felt the coldness in the air when the sound came near. Amaka and Ifeoma continued to talk about Lady Koi Koi over the next few days, their nerves growing more frayed each night. The whispers among the girls spread quickly. More girls claimed to have heard the heels at night, or even seen a flash of red shoes in the distance, disappearing into the darkness. The tension in the school grew. Even the teachers began to sense something was wrong. Though they dismissed the girls' fear as mere imagination. "We have to figure what is going on," Amaka finally said one evening, her voice firm. "This cannot go on. What if it is just someone playing a prank?" "Who would be cruel enough to do that?" Ifeoma asked, her face pale with fear. "What if it is not a prank? What if it is really her?" Amaka did not have an answer for that. She was determined to find the truth. The next night, Amaka and Ifeoma stayed up, sitting quietly in their beds, their eyes wide open, waiting for the sound. Hours passed, and the only noises were the usual ones: the crickets outside, the occasional rustling of bed sheets. But just as Amaka began to think the nights would pass uneventfully, there it was, faint at first, then growing louder. Koi, koi, koi. Amaka's heart pounded in her chest. She looked over at Ifeoma, who was sitting up, her eyes wide with fear. "It's happening," Ifeoma whispered, her voice trembling. Amaka nodded, her mind racing. She got out of bed, her legs shaking, and tiptoed toward the door. Ifeoma grabbed her arm, her grip tight. "Don't go," she pleaded, her voice barely audible. Amaka paused, torn between fear and curiosity, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she needed to know the truth. She gently pried Ifoma's hand from her arm and crept toward the door, her heart hammering in her chest. She leaned in and peered through the keyhole. What she saw made her blood run cold. A tall figure in the hallway, in the faint light of the moon, filtering through the windows. The woman was dressed in a long, flowing white gown, her face hidden in shadow, but there, gleaming in the dim light, were her shoes, bright red high heels. Koi, koi, koi. The sound echoed in Amaka's ears. Amaka stumbled backward, her breath caught in her throat. She didn't know what to do. She could feel Ifoma's terrified gaze on her, but her body refused to move. The footsteps grew louder again, and suddenly, the door creaked open on its own. Amaka froze as the figure stepped into the dormitory, her heels clicking against the wooden floor. The woman stood still for a minute, her presence sending a chill through the room. Amaka squeezed her eyes shut, her heart racing, praying that it was just a dream. She waited for what felt like an eternity, her entire body trembling. But when she finally opened her eyes, the figure was gone. Amaka blinked, trying to understand what has just happened. She could feel the cold sweat on her skin, her heart still pounding. She turned to Ifoma, who was still sitting up in bed, clenching her blanket tightly, her eyes filled with tears. The other girls in the dormitory were wide awake now, some whispering in fear, others simply staring at the door, but no one said a word. The next morning, the school was buzzing with nervous energy. Everyone had heard the rumors. Everyone knew what had happened. Lady Koi Koi had entered the dormitory, and her presence had been felt by all. The teachers tried to calm the girls, assuring them it was just a story, nothing more. But the girls knew better. The legend of Lady Koi Koi had come to life, and no one felt safe anymore. The once lively atmosphere of St. Mary's had been replaced with fear and anxiety. Some of the girls began refusing to sleep in their dormitories at night. They begged the matrons to let them stay in the chapel or in the staff quarters, anywhere but the dark, where Lady Koi Koi's hymns might echo. Others stayed up all night, their eyes wide open, praying that they would not encounter her. But no matter what they did, the sound of high heels continued to haunt the school. Every night without fail, the clicking of heels filled the corridors. Koi, koi, koi. The sound echoed through the classrooms, the staircases, the dormitories, and the bathrooms. Some girls claimed they had seen her in the mirrors of the bathroom, her pale face staring back at them behind their own reflection. Other girls said they had felt her cold breath on the back of their necks as they walked through the corridor. Fear spread like wildfire. Amaka tried her best to stay strong. She told herself that there had to be an explanation. She couldn't shake the memory of that night, of seeing the red shoes, of feeling the chill in the air when the figure had entered the dormitory. Amaka told Ifeoma what had happened. "I saw her," she whispered, her voice trembling. "She was real, but then she disappeared." Ifeoma stared at her in shock. "You shouldn't have gone," she said. "It's too dangerous. What if she comes for you next?" Amaka didn't have an answer. She didn't know what to believe anymore. But one thing was certain. Lady Koi Koi was still out there, still walking the halls of St. Mary's, her red heels clicking as she went. No one knew when she would strike again. Weeks passed and the situation grew worse. Girls began falling sick, their nails frayed from the lack of sleep and constant fear. Some even left the school, their parents pulling them out after hearing the stories of Lady Koi Koi's return. The teachers tried to maintain order, but it was clear that something had to be done. The school principal, Sister Agatha, called a meeting with the staff. The rumors had gotten out of control, and she needed to put an end to it. "This has to stop. This nonsense has to stop," she said firmly. "It's just a story, and we need to make the girls understand that." But the matrons exchanged worried glances. They had heard the footsteps too. They had seen the girls' fear and knew that something was not right. But they did not dare say anything to Sister Agatha. Every night, as the clock struck midnight, the girls would lie in their beds, their ears straining from the sound of heels echoing through the corridors. And every night Lady Koi Koi walked the halls, never resting, always searching, her red heels clicking in the silence. Koi, Koi, Koi. No one ever really escaped the terror of Lady Koi Koi. Even after they left St. Mary's, the girls carried the memory of her with them. It haunted their dreams, the soft click of heels echoing through their minds long after they had graduated. They would never forget the fear, the uncertainty, the coldness that swept through the school at night. Some tried to forget, telling themselves it was just a story, just a legend meant to scare them. But deep down they knew the truth. Lady Koi Koi was real. And as long as St. Mary's stood, her ghost would haunt its halls, always searching for her lost shoes, always punishing those who dared to cross her path. So even now, years later, if you listen closely on the quiet nights in the old school, you might still hear it. The sound of heels clicking in the dark. Koi, Koi, Koi.